Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. We'll get to the agenda. I wanted to have this meeting because there's been a lot on my mind. I've been going to these town meetings, and the overall issue that I find is a big problem with this town board is transparency. You know, they've had. We're going to talk about the river and rail. We're going to talk about the Letchworth sale. Both of those meetings had, you know, no publicity at all. When, in the case of in the case of Letchworth, back in April, when they brought in Hudson Park to talk about this project, there was literally no publicity at all about the presentation. You know, any publicity that was done was pretty much done by me the day before, because it was on the agenda. The town board, as you might know, doesn't even publicize the agenda until the day before the meeting, and it's getting later and later in the afternoon on that Monday before they even send out a notice. So oftentimes there's surprises in the agenda, like we won't find out what's on Tuesday's agenda. We know there's going to be a public hearing on the river and rail, but what else is on the agenda that day, I don't know until we find out on Monday when they send the agenda, they post the agenda. And like I said, oftentimes it's late in the afternoon, so there's not much time to even prepare that much for it. The river and rail publicity has been a notice in the Rockland County Times, and Jim Monahan mentioned it on the radio. But of course, not everybody listens to WRCR. There is a copy of the proposed law on the website, which is not a lot of effort to invite the public into the process, you know, and I want to talk about that a little bit when I talk about each of the river to rail and the Letchworth sale. But just in general, transparency is the biggest problem in this town. I think it's one of the worst, least transparent town boards I've ever seen. And I've worked with probably 8 or 9 supervisors over the years. He's one of the worst that way. It doesn't really encourage any kind of conversation or discussion. You know, these things pop up on the agenda, or next meeting we're going to have a public hearing on this, and very little or no discussion really about it. With the river to rail, Max, our town planner, gave a presentation, no PowerPoint, no images at all, just got up and spoke at the podium facing the town board. You know, no real explanation about what the current zoning is down there, you know, where these properties are located, nothing at all to really involve the public. And there were people in the meeting, and I came and videotaped his presentation, put it out there. Otherwise, a lot of people probably would never have seen that at all or known about it. So this is the problem, is the transparency and even in the way these laws, as we talk about the river to rail and the Letchworth, even the way that these proposals are being designed, it excludes the public from certain portions of the review, you know. So there's a continual effort, it seems to me, to minimize, to streamline, what they would call streamline, and reduce the public's knowledge of and participation in the process. So it's a problem with process, in my view. Do either one of you have any thoughts about that at all? Because I know that this has been frustrating to get, you know, and then having to put all that effort into trying to get people to know about things we should have been notified about by the town board. That's how I feel.
I'm completely agreement, George. I find it very frustrating. I mean, I've been following your posts and requests and all these things that are happening, and it's kind of unconscionable. It's the opposite of democracy, what democracy should be, which is involvement of the people, and they're not really allowing proper. They're not really following due process.
No.
In a normal democratic kind of, you know, we elected you, but you're not. You know, we didn't. You're not like the king. You know, it's not. We're not. You have a decree, and somehow we're just supposed to sit by and, you know, take these things. And they just are doing things with impunity, and I just feel like they can bulldoze you, and you know, and you'll just somehow, you know, they'll ignore you, and then we'll be enough people. Today's meeting possibly isn't well attended because it's of the timing. Because Saturday is when people go out to do errands, and you know, it might have been better in an evening, like on a Thursday or something. Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and I was thinking doing it Saturday morning before you go out might be nice. Having a cup of coffee and doing it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it have to be earlier because people, it's cool in the morning. That's like I'm at the garden right now, gardening before it gets hot. Later on in the afternoon, I'll be inside sipping a mint julep, so it'll be easier to do. But so I don't know. It's whatever.
We'll have more. We'll have more of these. I think it's important to have a chance to talk about these things, and I'm making an effort here, but I'll try and do better in terms of scheduling it. Maybe.
Well, you could maybe ask some people, people who our space, our space followers. Like, what's a good time for you? Like, what do you like? Maybe find out what works for people, because it's tough. It's tough. It's a tough thing. But my wife wanted to go for a hike, but I said, I want to listen in on George's thing.
Thank you. Yeah. The thing is, even exactly. Even having this public hearing on Tuesday in August. I mean, nothing like having a public hearing in the summertime. You know what I mean? When people are thinking about going to the beach or away on vacation, then you have a public hearing about rezoning the waterfront. So again, another effort to be not transparent, another effort to exclude the public from knowing what's going on, not having it at a time when people can conveniently attend. And then of course, not covering the meetings with video or Zoom or Facebook Live. 3 of the towns in Rockland are doing that. Ramapo does all their meetings on Zoom, but Orangetown videotapes them, allows public participation. So does Clarkstown. So this whole idea of not recording the meetings, not broadcasting them. I was up in Fishkill, visited my mom in Beacon, and the town of Fishkill has cameras mounted on the ceilings, and they have like 4 or 5 cameras, and you can see everything that's going on, and you can hear it. They have all the board members sitting up there. They talk to the public. The cameras behind the board looking at the public at the podium. You can see the people in the audience. You can hear everybody. And then they actually videotape that on the night of the meeting, and then they broadcast it on cable TV so people can watch it. We don't do any of that. We have so all these I'm concerned about public hearings, particularly the public input portion of excluding the public input, of course, is not right either. That the public speaking at the meeting was being cut off. But public hearings are even more important because, you get a chance to hear from other town residents. And now the Democratic Committee is videotaping the meetings, which is good. I'm doing the public input portion and trying to videotape the people at the podium. But we shouldn't have to do that. The town has money to invest in the equipment to do this. They get about over $300,000 a year from Optimum for what they call franchise fees. And that
really?
That's what they get from our rates. It's probably up to about 360. I thought I looked in the last budget. It's like 360,000, I think, or close to that.
Wow.
Yeah, and they get it from our rate.
Is it being misused or not used?
Well, I don't know what it's being used for. Maybe it's put in the general budget. I never heard about it being dedicated to any purpose, but of course, using it for this kind of purpose is appropriate.
Right.
With having the meetings videotaped, having the equipment, and we're not talking about a lot of money today. This can all be done without a big investment. So we're not talking. So you don't need $300,000 to do this.
Right. Sure.
So
that pays for her Facebook ID phone that she broadcasts the town board meetings with, right?
Oh, I don't know, and you couldn't hear half of what was going on with that either,
But let me just make a few comments, and
sure.
I think this presentation that was done by Max, overall it appeared to be intended to benefit the town and the town board. Actually, it was suggested at the request of Monahan. So when I was there, and George, you filmed it, so I reviewed your video again this morning. To me, it just is a rezoning that they want to make equivalent to something like the L1 district. But my concern with this project is that it's going to be approved by the building inspector based on some criteria that's under 4,000 square feet of building. But one thing that concerns me, that's a concern I have, because we had a part-time building inspector. I don't know if he's full-time now.
I know.
It's a lot of the CEQA process also, if somebody has to come up with the CEQA process, if the town's going to do that, that's another issue. But more importantly, the areas that they're suggesting that could be rezoned and redone for benefits of town. I mean, they mentioned gypsum. You know, I was shocked with that. Max did not know that the US Gypsum Company was bought out by a German company in
Yes.
2016,
Yeah.
and it's been sitting there for 5 years, and that's a major facility,
Yeah.
and it's a large area of land that could certainly be used to build up the waterfront. So, but you know, they still own that. So my point is, I don't know how they're going to access these properties that they're talking about. They're talking about the Lovett site. Yes, it was used to build bring the materials for the new bridge, and that's a good thing. But the other thing that shocked me is, and you talk about transparency, is that Max even mentioned that they didn't follow the proper protocol to allow the state to come in there to do that on the waterfront. And, you know, it just seems like they do things, either they're not well informed on what has to be done, but they
They're
just
going through the
follow
checking
along.
off the boxes, Walter. You know, they're going to say they had a meeting, they had a public meeting, they did a
Of course.
presentation. You know, this is, and of course, didn't tell anybody about it. You know, this is a waterfront thing, and they did no publicity at all for that meeting. So we might as well jump into the river and rail, since I got off the original subject of transparency. I agree with a lot of what you said there. This is a copy of the proposed law with my handwritten notes on it, which I just wanted to go over a few things. But if the purpose of the law is not necessarily a bad purpose, I'll say that from what I've read. You know, you can read it here. Monahan got on the radio and spoke about it too. But the purpose of the law is to reutilize brownfields that are not being currently used, you know, to try and get them back on the tax roll, to try to find some investment in them. So, you know, you can see what the purpose as listed here, you know, returning vacant and underutilized properties, attracting business, encouraging remediation. So those purposes that are stated in this portion of the law are not necessarily the problem. And as you pointed out, the problem is giving too much authority to the town board to determine which properties comply to be included in the plan. Like, how do you identify a brownfield? Which of the ones are going to be included and what their potential uses are going to be? And then being able to shortcut any kind of public review, because it won't go to the planning board. It'll be as you mentioned, the building inspector and the town engineer are given a lot of authority in this law to give approvals. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Another quick one thing I picked up. I mean, Stony Point doesn't have a town engineer.
Right.
So
Right.
Down?
Yeah.
no, they don't.
We have a
That's why
farm,
Kevin-
right? Yeah.
That's why Kevin Marr is always up there speaking, because he was the town engineer, and he has a lot of good statements that he makes. But as far as I know, they got rid of the position. So when they mention, you know, town engineer, I'm saying to myself, well, who's that person going to be?
Right.
That's going to, you know, oversee whatever the building inspector decides is appropriate based on, you know, whoever
Right.
decides to submit the plans to get into this zone.
Right. And if they're a hired contractor, then they're compromised in terms of their ability to independently look at these things, and they're going to tell the town what it wants to hear more than they normally do. I mean, because they're contractors. I mean, they're not employees. So what kind of, like you say, we won't have a consistent review by a town engineer if we have this town engineer now and some other contractor later, and building inspector. We know when Bill Sheehan was in there, he was sort of directing, in my view, directing things. Now he's not there. We have a John Hager who seems nice enough, but he's certainly not as familiar with the town. He's only recently here, you know, and what kind of investment does he have in these kinds of decisions? And they're giving a lot of authority to the engineer and the building inspector to make decisions about whether properties comply with this kind of brownfield category, whether they are suitable to replace what was there. And they're claiming that if the properties are of a type that is not expanding more than 4,000 square feet, I think, right?
Right. Construction.
that they basically get a free pass, it seems, you know, on any kind of overview. It's certainly not by the public. So there's a lot of questions about the process. Some of the things I pointed out in the process of writing an actual comment sheet for space for Tuesday's meeting. But, you know, for example, you know, about the setbacks, you know, some of these properties don't have to have any setbacks at all. You know, if they're proposed to the town and the building inspector and engineer approve things, we probably won't even know what's going in there until it's built. You know, we won't have any chance to really know what's being planned. All of a sudden there'll be another company in there, and, you know, with a brownfield site, won't even know. It's only a 50-foot setback on the riverfront, and then in some cases they could even lessen that, it seems, to less of a setback than that. You know, the
other question I have is there any published brownfield in Stony Point legally, from a legal perspective, that
Yeah.
they refer to and say this is a brownfield site in Stony Point, other than the fact that we know that there's some out there?
Yes, you're right. Let me bring up another thing here. The Rockland County Department of Planning. I'm getting good here with the sharing part. The Rockland County Department of Planning did write a comments, which I always try and get. And you know something, I put a FOIL request in this week for it, and Megan told me it wasn't available. I was able to get it directly from the Department of Planning. So they haven't even provided me with this document for a meeting that's happening on Tuesday. And it was written, you know, it was written on July 29th.
Yeah.
Why isn't that available? You know, because it's it's really critical of this project for the reasons that we're discussing.
That should be a public notice on their site.
Yeah, right. There should be something, link it, you know, to the website and say it's available. They won't do that. You see, this is another transparency issue, you know. So this idea of it being called a floating zone, you know, means it lands, you know, when the town decides it lands on a certain spot. We don't know where that's going to be. And that's not something that's revealed. And as the planning board, the Rockland County Planning Board pointed out here, without a public hearing, it says, so the local law does not contain any requirement that once the river to rail floating zone is landed to a specific parcel, the subsequent development of the site must conform to the proposal depicted in the landing petition. As a result, there may be a requirement that any proposed use of development of the site conform with depicted petition in the petition and land the RRBR floating zone. This is particularly critical considering the section of the law and the reuse permit that is administrative without a public hearing. It's issued administratively without a public hearing. They say it right there. And in this state, the proposed text amendment would not prevent a property owner from making a petition for the floating zone to the parcel, and then once approved, using the parcel in a different manner than originally proposed. So it really leaves so many questions in terms of how the land is going to be developed and how it's going to be used. Yeah, go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, one thing I looked at before and that's a great document. I hope they post that, or maybe you can post it to me, but I don't want to waste your time. One thing I looked at, it says this zoning is based on the municipal law, section 10 anyway. I looked at that, and one thing that struck out that jumped out at me is that it's supposedly, this is supposedly done for the protection. This is not supposed to change the protection and enhancement of its physical and visual environment, according to that municipal law issue. And, you know, that jumped out at me, and I said, well, I don't know if they're protecting anything there in the brownfield area.
Oh,
What are they trying to do and you know, who's going to see if they're trying to bypass something that should be done to protect it? The other thing I want to mention is the example that Max provided with regards to ONR.
right,
Made me question what he was talking about.
right.
Because essentially, that Lovett substation that exists right now, that's owned by ONR because the owner, the generation owners are closed down. That exists there. That project that he's talking about is going to happen regardless of this to begin with.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how. That was a really poor example of using that, because that has nothing to do with, unless they're gonna bring in a transformer on the river, but that project is gonna go one way or another. So I
Yeah.
would have rather had him talk about maybe the area behind ShopRite that we
Yeah.
know is a problem
Yeah.
and needs remediation. And
It was
maybe
a mediocre to piss poor presentation in my view. You know, there was not a real effort to help us understand not only what's being proposed, but why it's being proposed. I
Right.
suspect that, and I don't have proof of this, I suspect that somebody wants to develop some of these properties. They're in the background,
Yep.
you know, and before they come forward, they're going to change the zoning for them to give them what they want so they can do it as a use by right instead of coming to the board for zoning amendments afterwards.
And
So-
that's listed in your slide there in the paragraph 2. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Brownfield in a generic sense, and at
Yeah.
the bottom, what you underlined is critical.
That's right. Yeah,
They
and then
must
you mentioned,
clarify.
yeah, you mentioned about there is a New York State brownfield cleanup program. This is the issue that the planning board, the county planning board is raising in number 2, is are these properties part of the New York State brownfield cleanup program? Is that how we identify them as brownfields? Because the reason why I brought this up, Walter, was if you go down, which is the one, oh yeah,
Well, it says it in 2.
it says in number 2, right in the middle. You see that
Right.
it says there's only one actual brownfield site according to those criteria in Stony Point, the Ciabottoni property
Right.
site,
Gotcha.
South Liberty Drive. That's the only one that's actually considered to be a brownfield site according to that plan. So how are we defining the brownfield? That's the question they're asking there. These are all things that are so important, you know, so you can agree with the purpose. You know, Monahan talks about the purpose of this on the radio, and you can say, all right, it makes sense. But when you actually get to the procedure that's involved, that's where the problem is. It's leaving the public out of the process. It's giving them a lot of authority that is unchecked. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't conform with some of the criteria out there as to whether it's a brownfield or not a brownfield. You know, it gives them so much wiggle room to do
Yeah.
basically whatever they want to do.
Welcome to Stony Point politics, George.
This is exactly what's going on. You know, I mean, it's shown in so many different ways. You know, this is another example. Letchworth was the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, with giving Raj Amar what he wanted in zone changes back in 2019. You know, they gave him a lot of these, what they called overlay zone changes. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit when we talk about Letchworth. But you know, now this guy comes in and wants to take just a portion of that overlay zone, the housing part, and make that everything housing. So whether that's in our best interest or not is another story. But this document, I can certainly forward it to you after our call.
Okay.
And I can send you the one with my underline if you want that one. Yeah.
You fucking say, I know nothing about it.
Hello? You okay?
Well, what?
Yeah, so let's see. It's calling it streamlined process in number 3, brownfield sites do not involve significant construction, new facilities. I couldn't quite understand from the way this was written whether there would be a full type 1 environmental review or whether this review of the law is considered the type 1 review for anything that falls under the criteria of a brownfield, you see.
Right.
I didn't quite understand. Are they going to take a project proposal? It doesn't sound like they're going to do this. Take a project and put it through an environmental review with public hearings and planning board. Planning board is useless, basically. They're rubber stamp for the town board, but no public review at all in a lot of cases. I'm not clear as to whether or not there's going to be anything more than a very basic, you know, no public involved kind of review of these projects.
Yeah, Max essentially talked about submitting a package, and then he did mention a type 1 action under the CEQA.
Yeah.
provision. So, but you know, there's no details in what he
No.
did.
No,
It was very generic, and you know, it's a little concerning.
right. It says here, you know, the type 1 action presumes that there's environmental impact. You see, number 3.
Right.
And that's true. The thing is, are they doing, I guess my question is, are they doing the type 1 on this law as a review? Because this is the criteria for what they're going to approve, which is not clear. We know it's being a lot of holes in terms of defining what kind of properties and where they would be located. Is the type 1 action based on this proposed law and not on the subsequent proposed actual projects. You know, they might say, well, we did the type 1 action under the proposed law. This fits the criteria, so there's no need for any further environmental review or public hearings. So that to me seems like what they're doing, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's not clear.
You're not clear, you know what I mean? And when you have these kind of unclear things, all right, as noted.
I mean, it's basically what you said, you know, they throw this out, they call it a public meeting. I mean, there's really no time. It's in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
I'm sure most residents they don't even have a clue about this at all.
No.
And, you know, they're just going to rubber stamp it based on what they, you know, move forward.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, they should have some kind of a presentation on the night of the public hearing. So people can come and listen to that and then talk about it. You know, now you're going to ask people to come into a public hearing to talk about something they really don't know very much about. And reading these laws is not easy, but, you know, it falls in line, Walter, with the way they did the Letchworth property too. You change the zoning first and you don't tell them what you're going to build. And then once the zoning is approved, that's the rules of the game, really. But most people can't understand, you know, the rules of the game could result in 20 different kinds of plans. You know, some of them you might like and some of them you may not like, but they all conform to the rules. So you're not getting a picture or a vision for the future of the waterfront. And that's what we really need. I mean, we got Eagle Bay, we got this Baymar, all these units all squeezed in together down there. This is the beginning of our waterfront development. Now we're redesigning. So we're doing this so piecemeal that we really need to revise our waterfront plan. We need to look at our local waterfront plan, which is really old. It's not even digitized. I know how old it is because I was on the committee.
Yeah, well, I have a copy of it.
Yeah, and it's ancient, you know what I mean? And they've never really done
I think it's 2013, right? The amendment?
Yeah, well, they made
Right back
amendments,
then.
but, you know, again, they made amendments back in 2014 or 15, I think, having to do with the PW district when Jeff Finn that probably happened around 2015. They gave Wayne Courts this 10 units per acre, but we know how they did that as well. Then they counted underwater acreage and never mentioned it during the public hearings. I never remember talking about that. And then all of a sudden now we're finding they get 100 extra units for counting 20 acres underwater.
Right.
You know, I'm just saying this is the typical thing that's been going on for quite a long time in terms of not only cutting the public out, not mentioning things during the public hearing, and then having these surprises. Oh, by the way, we're counting the 20 acres underwater towards buildable on land, and now you've got 264 units at Eagle Bay instead of, you know, closer to 200, which is what Wayne Courts had proposed. Something a little closer to 200.
So let me ask you this, and because you have it up there. I mean, there's been plenty of times that, you know, the town says that it refers things to the Rockland County Planning Board.
Right.
And then you see these documents with all the questions. And I could only recall one time when he actually addressed that they did address some of the Rockland County Planning Board questions, but most of the time, I don't think they do, unless I just missed it.
Well, you're right. You're partially right. They have to address them in the final decision. They've got to address them, but they ignore them. They overrule them with a majority plus one vote.
Right.
And most of the time, these planning board, Rockland County Planning Board comments come up during the planning board review of something. Like they have to send it to these agencies to have them look at it. And they get comments back from Rockland County Planning, the Highway Department, and things like that. So they will review them, but they can totally ignore the comments by just overruling the vote. Overruling their vote. Yeah.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the thing is, they even mentioned this in the comments from the planning board, or the Rockland County Planning Board at the end. They mentioned all the agencies that they should have sent this to. They're saying they should have sent it to the DEC. They should have sent it to the Department of Highways, the Drainage Agency. Now, why didn't they do that? Is that true by law? They're supposed to do it and they're just not doing it. And can they overrule that? I don't know.
You know, I was just thinking, I mean, since it's only the three of us, but
yeah,
and it's your call though, but you know, this document is is extremely important. Maybe you can send it out to your people and
Yeah, I will.
wherever else you think is going to go, so it doesn't, because this has a lot of different questions, and I mean,
Right.
they
I
shouldn't
find
vote on
this
this.
to be very
Hopefully they don't vote on this Tuesday. I mean, but I think
I
that's probably what
suspect
they'll
they're going
do.
to, yeah, I suspect they're going to have to keep this open. And if there's any question at all about whether or not they've sent this, but they didn't even send me a copy of these comments. I had to get these through other ways. I put
No,
a
no,
question. Yeah.
I was thinking
So-
about something like this. I had written some things. I said, I was wondering what the Rockland Planning Board think, but this is it.
Yeah. Well, this is it. And I don't think they're going to approve it on Tuesday, personally. I think
Okay.
there's going to be some that would be my gut feeling. But the problem is they have this hearing and then they'll extend it, and they'll extend it a couple of meetings. But
Right.
you know, what happens is if you don't have the documents available in advance, the meetings, when people show up, they don't have anything there to even refer to. Let's go over what the county had to say. Oh yeah, you know, then they won't read it at the meeting. They'll say, well, it's on the file. You can ask for a copy of it.
Well,
You know, I mean, they don't give it to you. Yeah.
The way they operate. You
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
know that.
Yeah, the full environmental assessment form submitted is incomplete or unsigned. On the link on the town website, in addition to what I had foiled, which was the copy of the law, there is an attachment. If you go to the town website under this law, in addition to the law, on the back end of it is a copy of what they call this FEAF, right? This full environmental assessment form. And I looked at it and said, half of it's not filled out. And they brought this up too. Look,
Right.
FEAF must be corrected, completed, and signed. So here they're doing this FEAF thing and putting it up online, and yet it's not even complete or signed. So again, you know, another attempt to wiggle these things through without really providing all the information to the public. Now having a public hearing on Tuesday without even completing this FEAF form, which is the basic form you're supposed to have filled out in the beginning.
So George, what's the solution here then? Like, you know, it's like, it's awful. And it's obviously that they're just basically disregarding communicating properly with the public. So what do we need to do, like, to make that, to change that? I mean, you've tried all kinds of things. You're
Yeah.
posting everything online, but I mean, we're wringing our hands, tearing our hair out, but basically they're just doing what they want. So,
Yeah.
you know, do we have to, yeah, I know you've tried lawsuits and, you know, try all kinds of things, First Amendment rights, you know, that kind of thing. But like, what recourse does the populace, I'm sure a lot of people agree with you, but
People have to pay attention. These, you know, it's like this with a lot of things. It's kind of about our democracy, I think, and people making a commitment that, you know, it's not happening in Washington. It's happening right here in your own town.
Yeah, it's
And if you want open and transparent government, you have to go to the meetings and demand it, or get on the phone and call them and say, you know, I'm not happy about the way this is being done. People have to take some personal interest. So it's not just me, you know, they try to make it, oh, it's just George again, you know, which doesn't bother me. It bothers me a little bit, but I mean, you know, it's one of these things that I do because I believe in it. I don't care what they think about me or anything, but it shouldn't be about me. It should be about the larger, you know, community, and the fact that they're not following a procedure that engages the community at all. You know, the master plan really needs to be redone. I'd like to see more people talk about the fact that we're doing this all very piecemeal, and that and in terms of what people can do, I think register their opinion, whether it's in person or in writing, you know, participate, you know, in some level, participate. That's what I think is important. You know, I do have hope that things can change if people are involved and aware. And this is our community. You know what I mean? If we want to sit back and just let them do whatever they want to do, that's kind of what's going to happen. It doesn't mean that the purpose of this law is wrong. That's the other thing. Is it's like, I'm not saying this because I'm against the purpose of it. It's the way they're going about it and shortcutting the process, you know, and it only leads, in my view, it has only led to problems in the past, which it'll do it again, you know. And also they didn't identify, here's this one, number 13, the review must be completed by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Why didn't they go to the DEC with this and send it out to them? They only sent it to the Rockland County Planning Board, from what I understand, and the Town Planning Board. The Town Planning Board is just a rubber stamp for the Town Board. What are they going to say? I foiled any comments from the Town Planning Board, and I never got anything back from that. What comments did they have?
Well, Max did say that they weren't going to have a meeting in July or August, and maybe the
Yeah.
subsequent meeting they'd have some comments. So, but that's
Yeah.
going to be after the meeting.
After the public hearing. Yeah, right. So yeah, why are we having a public hearing now if we don't have that information? You know, and that all should be part of this discussion on Tuesday. But this is
Mike,
what we're
to
talking
answer-
about, the village of West Haverstraw and the village of Haverstraw. The town of Haverstraw and the village of West Haverstraw should have been included for their comments. That's part of the rules, is that you're supposed to notify adjacent communities. They didn't do that either, you know?
You know, Mives, you bring up a good question. You know, George has been on this for 32 years. I mean, the issue is people have to get involved, and it's even more than that. You know, people have to raise their voices, but it's all based on the town really letting the public know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, besides these procedural town board meetings where they just throw the stuff at you, and you're supposed to, you know, take it in and read it. And if you're not there, you're not going to know about it at all.
No.
They refuse to have workshops and things like this on
Exactly.
these huge projects that
Yeah.
are going to affect the town, you know, its geographical area and just the living in Stony Point status. They never do that. So without getting political, it's about changing the people who are on the town boards. They probably have well-intended meanings, but I don't think they're fit to serve on the board.
Well, it's group
based on what's going on
Yeah.
with
It's
regards to the town issues.
It's groupthink, Walter. You know, they're all this stuff has been talked about and decided. I'm sure, you know, the open meetings law is supposed to prevent town officials from meeting with more than a majority or with a majority outside of public review, outside of public view. Years ago, Phil Rotella used to come after the Haverstraw meetings, used to come up to the Stony Point Diner, and they used to all sit around and talk. I mean, that's what they did back then. You know what I mean? And you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to talk about town business outside of, but of course, with emails today and Zoom meetings, I don't know how you control that kind of thing, because a lot of this stuff can be circulated and discussed, you know, virtually discussed prior to the meeting. So everybody goes in with the idea that we understand how to vote. Thank you. You know, and the public is not involved in that. Look at the list of things. It's the New York State DEC, the New York State Department of Transportation, the Palisades, the Department of Health, the Department of Environmental Resources, the Highway Department, and the Drainage Agency. They're saying that all those agencies should have been notified of this to give them a chance to comment. So, you know, this is, the county review is always very helpful, I find, and they try to do a very thorough job, but unfortunately our town just overrules their comments. And I don't know what legal standing they have when they point these things out. I mean, if they approve this thing without going to those other agencies, can you sue them to get them to go to the agencies? I mean, who has the money to spend on lawyers to do that? We shouldn't have to be doing that.
We shouldn't have to go. We shouldn't have to do that.
I mean, I don't want to spend money on a lawyer to say you have to go to the planning board, you have to go to the county highway department to get approvals. You know what I mean? Because who knows what they're going to say? They could say nothing. You know, so you can't. I mean, you don't have the resources to do that. But this is it.
Rich, can I step in for a minute?
Sure, Mies.
Or to go from the macro to the micro.
Yeah.
I think we delineated the issues pretty clearly. I have an example, a local example, where, you know, I live on Wilderness Drive up on the Colorado Mountain.
Right.
And there have been some things happening up here which are a little disturbing. One is that we have a new house being built about 2 doors up from me.
Right.
And it's a builder, like he's a developer or a construction guy, whatever. He lived farther down the hill somewhere in the development, I guess, and he wanted a view. So he bought 1.8 acres from my neighbor and he proceeded to clear cut most of it. And then he basically probably brought in about 60 truckloads, dump trucks of fill and dirt, right?
Oh.
And he built it because it was a sort of a cliff, like a sharp drop off cliff kind of place.
Mhm.
It wasn't a flat, you know, most of it isn't flat.
Right.
So he proceeded to fill in, and he now has a flat area that he created for himself, like a backyard, but it's about 20 to 25 feet tall, and it's just dirt, right? So stones and dirt, when it rains, are going down into our neighbor's yard.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know if there's no town engineer and there's an inspector, but if I'm not mistaken, there's some kind of law that maybe you could tell me if you build a an embankment more than 4 to 6 feet, I think you have to have a proper retaining wall, like stones or boulders or something. I don't know if you can just like throw dirt out there and then hope for the best. So it's ridiculous. I mean, we have this whole thing could collapse and go right into the neighbor's backyard. So I'm just wondering if you guys know anything about this or how I could proceed with. I mean, we've talked to the town inspector because he was helping me with something, and I asked him, hey, we had this guy building this huge thing here next door. What's the deal? And he's just got a pile of dirt. Like there's no retaining wall. Do you have any ideas on how that works?
Is that John Hager? You spoke to him?
I think it was John. Yeah, he came to.
He's from up in Woodbury area up there. They hired him.
Right.
I'm not sure, like Walter said, I'm not sure if he's full time or not, but
yeah,
he's a nice enough guy. But I don't know.
He's a very nice guy.
Yeah. The thing is, when you bring in first thing is when you bring in more than, I don't know, is it 50 square yards of dirt or something like that, you're supposed to get a permit from the town to bring it in. So the question would be, did they get a permit to bring it in? And then, as you mentioned, they have to have erosion control at the very least. When you bring in that kind of dirt, you can't just let that dirt erode off the pile into the yards of the people nearby. That's totally illegal. You have to have they use that black plastic a lot of times.
Well, they have that. They have a little tiny thing, but I mean, that's not going to stop.
It's not really stopping that much. Yeah.
If we had a big storm blow through, it's gonna go down there like a river. It's gonna just go right over. It already has gone over it. So I was just wondering what I should do. Should I call the inspector and say, look, I want to see the permit?
Well, you could ask if a permit's been issued. I mean, certainly has a permit been issued, and what kind of conditions go along with that, in terms of maintaining the pile, like you said, to prevent it from eroding into my yard. It's we have these storms, and it's likely that when we do, a lot of that dirt is going to end up down the street. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
I think what I would recommend, and I've seen this before, if you get your neighbors involved, and just call the supervisor and tell them, listen, you're concerned about all this stuff, and then show up at a town board meeting.
Right.
And there was an example that just came to mind. They had a new residence going up on Willow Grove Road past the southbound entrance to Palisades Highway as you're going up to Harriman through that area. Anyway, long story short, they built this new house on top of the mountain, and they were bringing in dirt, and the neighbors were all concerned because of the things that you're mentioning, the drainage, and Monahan addressed all those issues. I was surprised, but it seemed like he took it personally, and he had a whole bunch of things that came up, and he basically said to the residents that they were looking into it, and so on and so forth. So that's what I would do. I would try and get your neighbors to go up to a meeting, sit with them and call them, and then have them bring it up on the town board agenda and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen that too, Mies, to amplify what Walter's saying. I've seen, a handful, maybe not even 10 people on an issue show up at a town board meeting, and they will flip a decision and change, and get involved in something if people show up at a meeting. That makes a big difference. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one other thing and this is something you probably all are aware of, but the houses up on top of the hill have been flipping. I guess it's high taxes, I'm not sure, whatever, but they've been flipping. 2 or 3 of them have flipped in the last 2 years, maybe 3 or 4. Anyway, a Hasidic family moved in to a house that they've been trying to sell. Someone else had been trying to sell for 2 years. Right. Moved in, a couple, and they immediately started putting children's plastic furniture out on the lawn. I thought to myself, okay, that's interesting. They, how many kids they have? Like there's like 10 different pieces of equipment. So sure enough, a couple months later, we start getting all these cars going up and down the road in the morning and then in the afternoon. So they basically opened a daycare center, and basically also all these Jewish moms are driving up and down the road. So we have like 4 times the traffic in a normal day. And there's no parking up there. There's a parking for two cars in their own, there's like a 0 driveway up there. And so they park all along the road, and it's brought all this traffic, and you can barely get around them. When 5 or 6 cars are parked on the road right there, it's very different. It gets dangerous. It's on a curve, and then our road at Wilderness Drive is very curvy. So these delightful Hasidic people are going up and down pretty fast, sometimes way too fast, and then on a dangerous situation. So I asked the inspector, who was inspecting a small structure that I built recently, I said to him, this is the situation. And he basically threw up his hands and he said, Andrew Cuomo, 25 years ago, signed a bill that said that you can have a facility like this with up to 16 children, and you don't need a special licensing or anything else. So he basically said, our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do. The only thing they can't do is advertise it with a sign right on the road. They have to move it, to the front of the building or whatever. But they're basically, starting this whole business, and they're impacting the whole, everybody's upset because you can't walk on the street because there's so many cars going up and down now. Used to be a quiet little cul-de-sac. So anyway, and so they kind of operate with impunity, and it's kind of infuriating. And the town really doesn't feel like they can do anything because they're basically following them. It's
right.
16.
The same thing is happening right now in the village of Haverstraw. I talked to a woman on the phone last week, and she happened to bump into me in ShopRite, and they're fighting a very similar thing where an individual house now is turned into a temple, but has gotten 4 times bigger, and the traffic in the area. Not only that, but the parking is not available. So I think what you're talking about is this RLUIPA law, which actually came under Clinton. It was approved with the idea of allowing religious uses to have exemptions from local zoning, with probably good intention, that you're not trying to prevent somebody from putting a church in a residential neighborhood or a temple in a residential neighborhood. However, that has become much bigger than that, where now you have yeshivas and other kinds of buildings added onto the temple, and it becomes this bigger facility in an area that just can't accommodate the traffic. And yet it's done, like you say, with impunity, because everyone's afraid of being sued. This is what's happening in Ramapo right now. It's happening in Haverstraw right now. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, it's happening in Stony Point. What kind of legal strategy? The town tried to change the zoning recently, or within the last 6 or 7 months, I guess. They did it either earlier this year or the end of last year, to modify zoning to limit hours of operations. There's certain things they can do to limit, operations, but not necessarily. But if they're going to give variances for things like this, I question whether or not the town has to give variances. If you're going to build something closer to a property line or larger or taller than is allowed by zoning, whether it's religious or not, I would think the town has some authority to not give zoning changes or zoning amendments. You know what I mean? And I don't know whether that project that you're talking about in your neighborhood, it doesn't sound like it's that the size of it is necessarily the problem. It's the use. That's But in other cases, it's the size, or the scope of the project has become much bigger than what was originally there.
Right. Exactly.
Let me just go on, if I could. I just want to mention, are you okay, Mies, now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm showing here this thing of Max speaking at the town board meeting, which I videotaped. I do have that. I did send that out as an email link to the YouTube video of it, as well as on the Facebook page. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth at least watching it, along with the review of the actual town law, and of course the county comments, which I did send out a link to the folder that has all this stuff in one place, all the town law and the county comments. And Scenic Hudson is also submitting a letter. They haven't finished it yet, but they are writing a letter as well. Jeff Enzavino is writing a letter. Let me just finish this part of it and we'll go on. I want to just talk about Letchworth before I don't want to hold you guys too long. This audio that Monahan was on WRCR, let me see if I can just get to the spot where he's talking about this at 136. Hold on 1 second. I got it on SoundCloud. Let me just play this. 136.
8:47 on a Thursday morning here.
136.
Locally, a couple things going on in town. We have
This is
a
how he's
public hearing
describing it.
coming up at our next town board meeting, which is August 9th at 7 p.m. at the Road Building. We're in the process of drafting the town law. It's called the River and Reel Brownfield Redevelopment Floating Zone. And the purpose of the draft law is to attract use and industrial development with the purpose of allowing rail use and also river access. The purpose is also just to try to bring in more industry to our riverfront zone. If you're aware of the former Lubbock plant that's been closed for years, that site was used to build the Como Tappan Zee Bridge. And
Right. They stored a lot of the materials there, if I'm not mistaken, right?
that's correct. They did a lot of the work, a lot of the bridge was put together there and then floated up on barges and assembled.
Right.
So the barge dock there. And so the purpose is to be able to use that property redevelopment. We looked at the zoning, and right now it's currently zoned for
Residential.
not industry. Actually, it's part planned waterfront. I don't know why, but it was zoned to use build townhomes or residence, and it really don't fit the site. So we looked at that.
Let me just interject. I'm going to continue this for a minute. Monahan was on the town board when they approved those zones. He was a town councilman under Jeff Finn when they did that in 2015. So he should know why he did it. But they did a change to what they call the protected waterfront zone. So I think what he's saying is there's sections of the protected waterfront zone that would be part of this river and rail, and they don't want the residential to be part of it. See, there's somebody's interested in something down there and they don't want them to be able to build it according to the way the zoning currently is, because the town allowed that zoning to be the way it is. That's what changed Eagle Bay and gave that high density. And they could do the same thing in other parts of the riverfront. So I think part of the reason why they're making this proposal of the law is to backtrack and take away some of the rights that are currently available to be sure that somebody doesn't come in and try to build a lot of residents in an area where it shouldn't be done. So he's claiming that the current zoning would allow that. And he even said, I don't know if he said it on this tape, but he said that construction of the Tappan Zee Bridge work down there by the Lubbock plant didn't even conform with the zoning that was allowed there. They let them build that stuff there, but that, according to the current zoning, that would not be normally allowed. So they're trying to change the laws
So
to
we're
allow
looking
that.
to rezone it to develop industry there. So I think it's a great opportunity to attract business. We had our town planner. We put on a great presentation. That presentation is available on our town website, and people can take a look at it.
Now, explain to me what this floating zone would encompass. And you mentioned that it would allow rail use and river access. What rails would it allow folks to use? Is this the Conrail freight line that goes through? And how would people be able to utilize it if Conrail's still doing it?
So the purpose is they're at both locations up at the former Lubbock site. There's actually a rail that comes off that main line. So rather than to use for trucking, we want to use and redevelop that rail line. Also at our gypsum plant that's sat idle for years, there's also rail access there. So that's the purpose, just to try to use that property instead of, located up here in Stony Point. It's very difficult to attract business for trucking to come all the way up to the north end of Rockland County. So if we can reuse that rail, bring industrial to the site, that's the purpose. There's interest in green energy. They talk about a company bringing staging for where they expanding wind tunnels out in Long Island. There's a company who's approached us about looking to possibly have a staging area, and this would be a perfect site to use that. So that's part of the goal. you know, there's not many places where you actually have river access. I was told that the closest area for major shipping on the river is up in Albany. So this site there, the former Lovett site, could be used, you know, for transportation. You know, so we're looking at it. I think it's a great opportunity to just attract businesses, generate some demand for local jobs. Like I said, reduce the trailer traffic. It's just attract business. That's the goal.
And give us all the authority we want to do anything we want without telling you. That's the part he didn't mention. Yeah, so that's the thing. And, you know, there is a proposal, I think, currently before the zoning board that I think Walter mentioned it earlier. Orange and Rothman wants to put some kind of a connection, right, Walter, to potentially connect across the river. There's a line that goes under the river.
What they're basically going to do, you're familiar with the transmission lines that go across the river.
Right.
There's two lines that go across the river.
Yeah.
What they want to do is they're going to put a tap into one of those lines down by the Lovett plant.
I see.
Okay. Install a transformer that's feeding the 138 kV system. And that's how they go. It's a reliability issue with the New York State Independent System Operator.
I see.
But that example, I mean, I don't know why they brought this into to demonstrate the usage, because it's going to happen anyway, regardless of whether, I think, in my mind, whether they have this proposal or not. It just seemed to be a poor example of something that's going to happen anyway. He should have provided another one. But anyway.
Well, they might have done it to make it look like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So the whole thing makes sense.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it's a way to sort of cloak the project in something that, like you say, would happen anyway. And sounds like a good idea. But there's a lot of other things that could be done down there too. He was talking about the shipping being deep there, I guess, and there's a lot of other uses that could come in. I also have a feeling there's other things in the background behind the curtain that we're not seeing right now, and they're trying to get the zoning changes so those uses would be done as a use by right. Yeah, Walter.
Just one thing, that law that they didn't follow with regards to having these people come in and put that project up there is called the Monroe test.
Oh, I
That's
see.
what Max was talking about. They should have applied that Monroe test, and they didn't.
I see.
So, but anyway, before, you know, can I provide some information to Mies? Is that the way?
Yeah.
Mies?
Yeah.
Mies? Okay, I would, my wife's involved with social services, so I asked her very quickly. There is some, you can have up to a certain amount of people to build a facility for daycare, but it has to be registered and it's based on age. And it has to be registered by the Rockland County Departments of Social Services. So she suggested you call them, but more importantly, there's a group called Child Care Resources in Rockland County. You should call them to see if they're licensed. And their number is.
Hold on, give me, hold on. Okay, what's the number?
Well, it used to be 914-425-0572.
And what was the name of the organization?
Child Care Resources.
Okay, because apparently when they moved in, they were from Muncie, right? Surprise, surprise. They didn't have a license for here, and that was one of the issues. They were licensed for Muncie, but not Stony Point. So I think that as far as I know, they went ahead and got the license transferred to here, but I could check on it. I'll check.
But that's
It's Child Services, you said?
yeah, Child Care Resources.
Child Care Resources. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll give them a buzz. Just to make sure. Yeah, I mean that's kind of it's almost like the town. They just do things and then look for justification, or look for the proper laws or licenses or whatever they need after they've already done it.
Exactly. That's what usually happens. I mean, after the fact, they say they should have done this.
And you can see from the county. The county knows a lot more than we do about a lot of these things. They don't seem to be even following proper procedure about this law and having all the agencies that should be reviewing it review it. At least that's what the county planning board is saying.
Right.
Let's just jump over to Letchworth for a minute. I'd like to just go over that in the next 15 minutes or so, just so we have a little bit about that. This is a presentation that was given on May 14th. Again, one that was not publicized at all. They didn't expect anybody to show up, and the room was full only because I publicized that. I know it's that because day before I had to send stuff out about it, and people, how do you find out about it? Oh, we found out about it yesterday.
Right.
So this is what we're talking about: 500 units of residential housing on Letchworth. The Kirkbride Hall would be used as a courthouse, I believe. And there's some other things that are involved. Now, what's the problem with this is it's going to be on the ballot in November. The supervisors talked about that. Hold on just one second. Let me see if I can get that that sound up on that one. Hold on. 10:24. Hold on a second. To the right spot. There we go.
When is the next opportunity that people would have to examine what's going on with Letchworth Village before that actually gets put up to a vote? As you mentioned last week, that could happen in November.
Yeah, so I've been on a couple phone conversations, conferences with our attorney, Brian Nugent, who's been reaching out to the proposed developer. The next step would be to have a memorandum of understanding where the developer would know that he would have the first opportunity to purchase the property, and he would have the opportunity to do his due diligence, hire engineers and a firm. We'd have to, if we're able to come to an agreement for an MOU, then there would be opportunities to have more. We only had one initial public presentation. I would have more advertise it and try to get more opportunity for residents to ask questions and to come see what the project would be.
Just pause it there for 1 second. This was recorded on June 9th. As of now, I've not heard anything about MOU. I'm going to foil a copy of it on Monday to see if it even exists at this point. But how long are we going to have to wait to hear about what they call a memorandum of understanding, which is supposed to be is the terms of what kind of an arrangement we're going to have, and then have to vote on this in November. And according to Monahan, I think he goes on and talks about this when I continue playing it. The town doesn't have to, even if we vote in favor of the sale, they don't have to sell it. And they don't have to follow a lot of the things because there won't be a final contract until they decide whether they're going to sell it or not. So it sounds to me like if you're going to sell town land, you want to know what the contract is. It's the same thing with Raj Amar that gave me a problem with that sale of that property, is the contract was not clear. There was a lot of holes in it. Other people had different reasons for why they opposed that, but there's a lot of things that were not put in that contract, and we were selling property without knowing the answers to it. So now Monahan's talking about an MOU, which we haven't seen yet, and we're probably not going to be notified about it. I'm going to try to see through a FOIL request whether it exists or not. But we're not being told about an MOU, whether it exists, what the terms are, a memorandum of understanding.
And then if it's going to move forward, we're going to let the residents decide if this is appropriate for them. You know,
this is a lot of BS because he's saying that he learned his lesson last time to give the public a chance to vote on it. Well, what are we voting on? We're not voting on anything we understand. You know, this idea of voting on putting something up on a ballot from a proposal that was made without any details or not much details, and certainly not the business details of money and all those kind of things that we'd be interested in. And also the question, in my view, is do we want to have only residential there? Do we want 500 units of housing? Is that what we're going to do? No hotel, you know, all the things we talked about at Letchworth in the past. Why is this guy being given exclusive rights for a proposal? Why aren't we looking at 10 proposals for that property? You know, Monahan will say that for 20 years, we tried to market this property unsuccessfully and people came in and left, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't only until 2019 that we gave this high density housing. You know what I mean? The high density housing is really what's allowing this guy to build this, because back then he couldn't have done it because the town didn't allow for it. We didn't want high density housing there. Once they changed it in 2019 for Raj Amar, which I understand he was going to buy the property. Now that didn't go through. Now this guy's coming in and just taking what Raj Amar had gotten and just taking that portion of it having to do with the housing, the assisted living, the senior housing and all that. And he's proposing just that portion of
property, you know, and I understand everybody has different opinions. Nobody is ever going to be we're completely in agreement on what is the best course of action for Letchworth. But that's why I think putting it to a vote is the best way, and let the residents decide if this is something that will suit the property. And, you know, I'll be perfectly clear. We've learned from the last, what happened with the last proposal. So we said right away, let's just, if it's going to go forward, whether it's this or a different developer, we're going to put it out to the residents to decide. So it would, you know, we wouldn't have a special election. It would be on the November general election that's coming up. So we have time to see if it does come together. Hopefully we can come to an agreement and actually sign a memorandum of understanding. And then we know that we'd be able to start marketing and putting the information out there for our residents.
Yeah,
I
so,
thank you very much, Supervisor Monahan, for joining us.
all right. So the thing is, we're not going to know until the last minute in September sometime about whether or not what this is. Okay. And then it's also not going to be complete in terms of telling us all the details. I mean, just like you did before, you know, I don't know what this memorandum of understanding is going to say. It's not going to be a contract. And it gives them a lot of chance, even after the vote, of whether they want to accept it or renegotiate portions of the contract. So we're not going to really know what we're voting on. That's the biggest issue I have with this, is what we're going to actually get, what we're going to know, what's in it. There is a presentation. This video is also, I videotaped this as well. This video is online. I have the links to it. Let's just see here. Take a look at this for 1 second. So this is the PowerPoint presentation, which I'm not sure if it's on the town website or not, but if we go to number 10, I think is where it starts. He does some nice work. This is the kind of work that he does. He also hires nice photographers that know how to photograph it. So they look very impressive, but these are as he considers the goals of what he wants in Stony Point. He was showing examples in his PowerPoint of what he's done elsewhere. But these are the parts of the presentation that had to do with Stony Point. You know, it's interesting that I've seen this go back and forth a number of times because I know about the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA. They mention here 24 acres. They've been at 24 acres, 25 acres, 26 acres, 28 acres, I think they've mentioned. And now he puts in 24 acres. There is a stipulation, I believe, in SECRA that if you go from 24 acres to 25 acres, it requires what they call a type 1 action, which is a full environmental study. So if they can quote this as being under 25 acres, that could also maybe, you know, I'm not saying, I'm not sure, but could also eliminate some of the environmental review that might otherwise be required if it was more than 25 acres. So with Roger Moore, I think it was 26 acres. Now all of a sudden it's 24 acres. You know, I question what the benefit is to the town to have all that housing.
Always
Now,
on it.
hold on.
Let me just comment. Something that most people, I think, don't know. The only reason I know about it because I was involved with them.
Yeah.
MOUs, memorandums of understanding, is not an enforceable document.
Yeah.
So one of the things the town didn't learn, or Brian Nugent didn't learn, is that he shouldn't be filling out an MOU that can't be enforceable. For instance, the $10,000 a month payment that they were supposed to be making to the town over 24 months was never made, and Monahan lied about it even when we asked him at a town board meeting because he said it was too small of a sum to report. Then about a year and a half later, he essentially told the town that they made a mistake, and it wasn't really, they didn't provide those $10,000 a month payments. It's crazy. So it should be a contract.
They didn't have the authority to do it, according to what I remember, because they couldn't hand over the property. In other words, it still had to go to a vote. I think that was part of the reason. Yeah, so they were promising something they couldn't promise, and as a result, he was not required to make the payments. So we never got that 10.
So we should be dealing with contracts and no MOUs.
Yeah, exactly. What does it mean otherwise? It means nothing. And it doesn't sound to me, Walter, that we're going to see a contract until after the vote goes either way. And to say you're giving the public a chance to vote on something that they don't understand, what does that mean? You know, I mean, really? Would you sell your house if you didn't have a contract? I mean, come on, who would do that? you know?
And the Rockland County Business Journal is saying it's approximately 30 acres. So I don't know where they got
Right.
that.
That's
from.
what I mean. This number, he put 24 because I'm sure he's aware that 25 means you have to do a full environmental. I'm sure that's the reason why I'm not, you know, I don't have proof of it. But these are some of the pictures of things that he's talking about. So, you know, I'm sure he does nice work and all that.
One of the questions I have with regards to his proposal, besides changing 2 of the holes on the golf course, which is going to be a big issue, is they talk about a new sports and a recreational center. And I think at the meeting, the question wasn't asked, but when I left that meeting, I did not think that new recreation center that he was talking about was going to be open to the Stony Point public.
Right. Exactly.
Although that the recreation center is going to be just for the people who
that live
invested
there.
in that. And that's a big deal to me.
Oh, yeah. And they have it here, I think, community clubhouse. But I think that might be what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah. And the courthouse would be Kirkbride. So this is right. This is the whole thing, multifamily. So instead of getting a hotel, we're getting multifamily up on the front. You know, these are all things, let's see. So, you know,
and the height of their buildings was higher than the zoning, and even Monahan pointed that out at the meeting.
right.
You're talking about 55 feet and, you know.
Oh, so they're higher than what's allowed by the code. Yeah.
Right,
New
45.
sports and recreation center. This is what they're talking about here.
Right.
So that's the thing they're going to have, a fitness center, yoga studio. But you're right. I don't think it's for the residents of the town. I think I remember them saying that it's for the people that live there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, this is what they're talking about in terms of the breakdown. Yep.
I have to get off in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. We're going to quit. We're going to end it.
That's
You know, a lot of the questions with this also have to do with the sewer system not being able to handle this, the traffic, the road structure, what we'd have to do to make improvements. So there could be a lot of costs for the town that go along with this. Even hiring extra police officers, you know, when they talked about Eagle Bay, they talked about hiring 1 or 2 extra police officers and an extra police car. So,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
these are all costs that we would have to assume for this. So they're not talking about those things as well. Yeah.
You know, one thing I'd like to mention, I don't know 100% if I'm saying the right thing, but I don't think that the sewerage goes in from that area.
It goes to Haverstraw, right?
It goes to Haverstraw.
Yeah. So is that all worked out? You know, in other words, if you're voting on this, do we know what's going to happen? Yeah. Like, are these the questions that have been answered? You know,
Exactly.
so he seems to build nice stuff. I mean, it's very, to me, you know, very
Looks pretty.
appealing. Yeah, it looks pretty. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's not like he builds junk. You know what I mean? But the question I think is, do we want all residential there? Is that where we really want for that town-owned property? Because I'll tell you, I think we could have sold this even years ago for residential if we had zoned it that way. Now it's zoned that way for Rajamar when he wanted it.
All right.
So there's a lot of builders out there that probably could do something like this, and we could get different proposals. I don't know how this guy got in the door. I'm assuming he knows somebody or took the initiative, because there was a lot of publicity about this sale that didn't go through. And he just took the initiative. Yeah.
One issue that I have too is that we don't know what the town is going to sell this for.
Right.
And they're probably working that out in the MOU.
Right.
But I mean, in my mind,
Right.
you know, we've paid a lot of money over the years, whether
Right.
it was appropriate or not for the
Right.
town to get that property. And it's just another way of, you know, originally when they brought that property, it was supposed to be for town use and for park use.
Right.
And they've changed that whole thing. So I'm not really sure. You know, the developer's talking about $10 million in cost to remediate the property. And then he's saying we're going to get 1.2 million in taxes, which is nice. But
Right.
at what
There could be
cost?
other costs associated with that.
At what
too.
cost to the town?
Yeah. Just one more thing. I'd like to put up this. It looks like it's showing the rest of my desktop as well.
Yes.
This,
Bring low cost energy.
yeah, bring in low cost energy. So I just, you know, we can end on this, I guess. And I signed the petition. I will send out a mailing to our space list.
Yeah, we only have 35 people who signed it. So thank
Yeah,
you.
so you could use some more. I think, as I mentioned to Diane, I think it's important to build public support before you go and ask him for a meeting. Show that there's a few hundred people that at least signed this, and that there's interest in it. Because he's obviously been not giving you the warm welcome when you come there, looking for. And it's a good idea. I can see. I talked to George Holman about it on the radio a couple of times, and I know the town of Orangetown is doing it, and some of the other villages. So it's one of those things, and if you can't really deliver it right away, I think there's delay because of this time has passed and we can't get in, obviously, for this year. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but I do believe I think it's worthwhile to build support and awareness and then do a presentation of some sort, whether it goes with or without the supervisor's approval, so the public can be more aware of it. Maybe do a Zoom presentation, even if, or something else in public. But anyway, this is the end. It's 10:29. It's almost 10:30. Thank you, both of you, for being on the call. I appreciate it. I'll try and do a better job next time of scheduling this, but I felt I had a lot on my mind I felt I needed to talk about. So thank you for listening.
George, again, as always, thank you so much for your dedication and
Thank you.
put in. And believe me, there are people that are getting your information, and it's certainly putting into into the equation, which wouldn't be there otherwise. So you're doing an invaluable service to
Public service.
the community like no other that I know of. And if there were a way to get you to be on that board or council, that would be the ideal, or someone else that we know who could then channel information to us. That would really be the ideal, is to how do we go forward. I know that's not easy to do because it's kind of got a lock on it or something, but
There's an opening on the planning board right now because one of them, Jay Cataldo, I think, who they just put on, all of a sudden now he's off. Someone told me he's moving out of the area. So, but he seemed like a young guy they wanted to put on. He's an up-and-comer in the Republican Party. It's always a political appointment, it seems. But they're saying that there's open, applications, which I don't know how open they really are or who might apply. It seems to be they want to put people on there that are going to listen to what they want to do, not necessarily think about the planning impacts. But thank you very much, guys. Have a great rest of the weekend, and take care.